which is more cut to the action, to use the movie metaphor, which is wherever you find intense sensation, bring your awareness to that sensation, let it kind of saturate there like water into a sponge. Try as much as possible to let go of thoughts, any sort of internal images or thoughts that you have about the sensation, and really open to the sensation and be with it, spend some time with it. I think people, a lot of times when they spend a little bit of time paying attention to the sensation, they start feeling the vibration of it. An intense pain in the body or an intense pleasure often has really long wavelength, kind of slow-moving wavelengths, as well as kind of higher-pitched, frequent wavelengths. And I think a given intense body sensation often has several of these wavelengths intermixed. So I think when a person really gets in there and feels sensations, some sort of sense of solidified body that's either suffering or having this intense pleasure breaks up, and there's more of a sense of fluidity and more of a sense of transparency and more of a spiritual experience that one can have.
But the purpose is not to seek any particular experience, right? But rather to just observe what is?
My understanding is the idea is to open to the body sensations, and then just what happens, happens. Sometimes they get more intense, sometimes they get less intense.
But not to pick and choose or seek out any particular thing.
Yeah, a lot of my students will say, well, this happened, how can I make it feel good again? How can I, or it goes away, and I just say, don't worry about it. Just whatever's happening, rest your awareness there, wherever your awareness goes in the body when doing a body meditation. It's whatever's happening is what's supposed to be happening, and pay attention to exactly what is happening. And then, so that's cut to action, tilt and pan.
What about sounds, our mental chatter, our endless, ceaseless monkey mind?
Well, that's the third in the foundations of mindfulness, and I've come to really appreciate the wisdom of putting them in this order. I have some of my students will say, a lot of students actually, when I go around, I say, why are you coming to this class? The thing I hear most from modern office professionals is their mind is driving them crazy. I call it being eaten alive by one's mind. And I think a lot of people would like to figure out a way to meditate on the mind just right away. But I think, the breath is kind of uncontroversial. We don't really identify with our breath as us, for the most part. It's a relatively simple way to start meditating. It's dynamic, it's always changing, but it's not a crazy bucking bronco the way the mind is that'll just throw you off like that. Also, it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to disidentify from the mind and be like, my thoughts are not me. So it's a very frightening experience, it's a very confusing experience. Whereas just to watch the breath, to have the experience of seeing the breath, of putting it, rather than something that's behind our eyes, behind our awareness, kind of running us, to something we're actually looking at, how it moves, like a
monkey in a tree.
Like a monkey in a tree. That's a lot easier. And then the body's a little more complicated. It's more complex. There's tightness and knots in it, but it's something that I think most people take a.
It's also hard to detach from, because when certain sensations arise in the body while you're sitting there trying to be a little perfect Buddha, often it will stimulate memories or daydreams or hopes and fears or old traumas that one had forgotten, one even lived through or exist sort of in the memory of the body.
Yeah, definitely. I think a person's experience of being a human being often has all their thoughts, their body sensations, their feelings. All of it kind of is one big mush often, and it. To a mind that's not paying attention, it's hard to differentiate them. But I think picking one particular one as an object of meditation, starting to peel out where are the sensations, how specifically is this aspect of being manifesting, is a great step towards being aware, being mindful, being liberated from unconscious suffering.
And the purpose isn't so much to pick and choose and define or designate any particular sensation or thought as the right one and the others as the wrong ones, correct?
Yeah,
but rather to accept what is, as it is.
And a very interesting thing happens there. I remember when I was living at the Tassajara Monastery, we wouldn't really eat terribly much, and by noon we would have been up for about 8 hours. And I have a really high metabolism, so I'd be very hungry. And I felt hunger. It was like a physical pain. It's a sensation I think pretty much any human being can relate to. I mean, something we've all felt. And I found that by really opening to and being with the hunger and just letting it be, and not trying to pick and choose which sensations, like going off in a daydream specifically to avoid it, which is something I think a lot of people would do, sitting there feeling some sort of physical pain. But as you say, not choosing, not picking, not trying to cultivate,
determine or define.
I just felt the hunger in my belly, the kind of something kind of radiating off my face, the kind of feeling of weakness in my limbs. And I found that the feeling of hunger abated, the suffering abated, the feeling of kind of being victim of something abated. And I just sort of sat there and I felt, I mean, it's not like I liked being hungry, but the I need to eat right now was a lot less. By not picking and choosing, I actually developed a lot more choice.
Right.
It's a way, one of these paradoxes.
By not labeling and chasing after something, craving something, or being averted to something else, one can observe what it is, and it loses its reign on one. It loses its control over one.
It's a very delicate process, I find. I mean, when I was living at the monastery, I was a lot more on top of these sort of things. I was very mindful, and I think that one thing that one of my teachers, Gil, says is everything's impermanent and concentration is impermanent as well. So that level of concentration, of being able to be hungry, open to it so much that, and be aware of where the sensations are so much that I developed kind of some spaciousness around it, and it wasn't pushing me. I don't expect that level of Buddhist mindfulness when I'm living my city life and going to my job and going out socializing. But in the monastery, I learned a lot about what's capable following some of these practices.
They say that the mind makes a dreadful master, but a wonderful slave. And unfortunately, most of the time, we're completely at the mercy of our minds.
Yes.
Enslaved to our hopes and fears and loves and hates and cravings and aversions.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings is by Socrates: "The unexamined life is not worth living." I mean, that's something I heard when I was, in elementary school when we studied the Greeks. But I think in my Buddhist practice, I have more appreciation for that statement as the years go by. Not necessarily not worth living, but just examining life, examining what it is to have a mind, what it is to have body sensations, what it is to have the third foundation of mindfulness, which is Vedana. So Vedana is or second foundation, actually. Vedana is often translates as feelings. So it's not exactly what we would say in the English word feelings, though. It's whether a certain body sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And this can be a big revelation for people when they start examining this with mindfulness. A lot of times when we feel something pleasant in the body, we're not even aware of it. We just unconsciously kind of move towards it. And when something's unpleasant, we often are not really aware that we're experiencing unpleasant sensations in the body either. We just sort of move away from it. In that sense, we're not that much more complex than amoebas, who just, they come up to salt and kind of like, not good. Come up to a little something to eat, good. So starting to be aware of when in our bodies we feel a sensation as pleasant, when we feel it as unpleasant, when we feel it as neutral, can often be a really great learning and a really great practice of awareness.
So the difference between Buddhist meditation and just ordinary mind is, instead of when we itch, we don't just scratch automatically, mindlessly. We itch and observe the sensation and decide whether or not to scratch. Or if we do scratch, we're aware that we're scratching.
That's what my teacher Shinjin Yang says. A Buddhist meditator, this is one of his humorous definitions, is someone that will itch 5 times completely, mindfully, and intentionally before scratching. So exactly.